Human-first experiences are going to be what wins for SEO strategy next year. We can't just create content for AI. The pages need to be designed for real humans. And ironically, I think that gets very lost in the AI messaging at the moment. But I think everyone needs to remember that AI is designed to be as helpful as possible for the user, and we need to do the same. I'm Kirsty McLellan, and this is SEO in 2026 Additional Insights.
Kirsty, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
So my number one tip for 2026 is that SEO pages shouldn't be built as AI encyclopedias. They should be designed with clear human-first experiences that help users decide. We're seeing with the new sort of focus on AI and chasing AI visibility, the pages are being designed with only AI in mind. And if we do that in 2026, we're not going to see pages that win.
So how do you design a page for AI and humans?
It's a very complicated question, but AI are trying to be as useful for humans as possible. So really, when we're designing content, that's what we should have in mind. What we're seeing at the moment is brands chasing that visibility. So what they're doing is trying to re-answer every single prompt question that could possibly be asked. And that means that these pages that are being created are really, really long. They're very heavy on content. It's very educational content. And that doesn't necessarily work for a user. A user needs a page that they land on that is digestible. It's easy to find the right information. There's a clear next step. And when we're trying to design for AI and human, it's finding that balance. We have to answer the right questions, not all of the questions.
Are we not heading to a place where our content is consumed primarily on AI search engines, and therefore perhaps there's an argument to design just for AI, and then AI will pick out the sections that are right, it believes, for the human?
Potentially, eventually. I think we're in that limbo period at the moment. We see when we do user surveys and questionnaires that there is still that adjustment period of when AI is used and when it's not used. It's often used as a research tool, as a clarifier, but a lot of users still aren't confident to do their full journey within AI. They want to be able to go to a trusted website or the brand of their choice and then continue their journey there. That might evolve over time, but in the current space, we still need to be thinking about how users are consuming content on our websites as well.
$64 million question. In your opinion, how long is this limbo period going to last for?
It's really complex. It depends on how the AI evolves. I think there's still quite a lot of lack of trust within users for how they're using that AI and the information that's being consumed. They still want that validation. So I think it's probably a couple of years away until we're fully sort of embedded into that full AI user behavior, and we have the trust to go from research to purchase completion within that process. I think there'll be a lot of hiccups along that way, and it all depends on the type of user that's willing to adapt that. So you might see younger generations adapting quicker, but I think, for the next couple of years, we're probably in that process of transitioning over.
Okay, so we're going to design our pages for both AI and humans. You mentioned that the content tends to be quite lengthy when we're trying to optimize for AI. Do we need to cut the length of our content to actually appeal better to humans?
What we find is that long content does appeal to users. We find that, especially if it is a textual, I think you can keep that long form content, but you've got to be more structured in how you present that, thinking about creating that page or making sure you can find an answer really quickly. So that might be, having really clear indexes, jump links, titles, thinking about how humans consume data as well. We don't love reading lots. We don't want to sit there and trace through everything. We want bullet points, easy comparison tables, visuals that support the page that we're on, which are actually all things that AI really loves as well. So you are hitting a lot of the tick boxes from their point of view. There is, I think, a lot of that content is the structure that we need to focus on.
And you mentioned jump links as a good way of kind of getting into the piece of content that is precisely relevant to the answer that the user is looking for. However, you also talked about shorter content, more likely to appeal to humans. Are we better off really optimizing for very long keyword phrases, but also ensuring that our content is on individual URLs as a piece of best practice, and keeping our answers short, our pieces of content short, but having more web pages?
I think there are pros and cons to both. I think if your questions your user trying to answer are quite connected, then a disjointed journey with lots of pages can feel difficult, and it can, cause early exit or bounce from pages if they don't think the information they're looking at is relevant or serving their needs. So having a central hub page that certainly answers the common FAQs that come up and then supporting pages is probably the preferential route.
Would you ever advocate designing separate pages for AI and humans, or does that just send mixed signals?
I think that sends really mixed signals.
Yeah.
I think, AI is not going to really tell the difference between what pages for it or what pages for the user. So I think you could confuse your content, or it might impact your visibility negatively from an AI point of view.
Okay. Can we maybe talk about a few elements that are great to incorporate within your pages for both humans and AI to try and optimize your pages for both?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are some really practical and quite easy things that we can be doing with our content. And I think that's, taking a step back before you start your content and going, what is my user's intent? Really clarifying that piece so that when you go to create it, every point you're going, does this serve my user? And then when we're going to create that page, is starting with the structure. It's going, right, okay, where are my key messages going to be? What visuals am I going to need to support? What text formats should I be using? Does it best fit a table? Does it best fit bullet points? And then building that page into quite digestible sections. So thinking about summaries, which both AI and humans love, thinking about, how is your user making their next step? So thinking about those navigational elements. We don't necessarily want to land our user on a page that doesn't go anywhere. They have an action that they're trying to do. So thinking about whether it's a clear CTA or are there micro events or navigation elements that you need within the page. I think we should stop hoping that a user is going to scroll and make a decision off the end of it. It needs to be a more guided process through that journey. And I think the final step is, when you have created that page and that content, take a step back and go, okay, if I was to land on this page cold, would I know what to do? And just take that moment to go, okay, have I served the intent I said this page was to set out for?
So that sounds like a use case for a website that I used to use called usertesting.com, where you can get people who haven't been customers, haven't used your website before, to actually go on your site and crawl your site and record a video of that experience, landing on that page for the first time. Is that something that you tend to use, some similar process like that, to assist you with directing you on what to enhance for existing content?
100%. My background is conversion rate optimization. So I'm always going to push that you should do some form of user research when you are creating any page, any website experience. You should be getting relevant users to test that. Often we sit back and go, I think that fulfills the customer need. But actually, I'm not the regular customer anymore. I work in digital marketing. I'm going to be a lot more savvy with the process. I'm also going to have a number of biases when I go in. So making sure that you do use, user research tools like user testing or user analytics or, a number of ones that are out there. It's really, really useful to get sort of that result and understand if the user is getting what they need from the page. And you can do that in different forms. So you can do sort of that longer form testing where you might get a user interview, whether it's moderated or unmoderated, to be able to judge the page experience. But you can also do really quick UX testing as well around copy, especially, and page design. So you can do sort of 5-second tests where you could ask a user to recall what they saw on the page. So you can understand if your key message was taken away. You could do a comprehension test to be able to understand if they understood the information that they read. And those are all really helpful things when sort of creating pages and creating content.
Brilliant advice there. So I'd love to come back to the metrics that you look at to try to determine whether or not the changes that you've made on a page actually has a positive SEO effect. But just before I do that, the other thing that you mentioned is use the phrase, you can do this in different forms. And talking about different forms, you can incorporate different forms of content on a page. You can use different forms of media on a page as well. Where does video come into this, and perhaps imagery as well? How does AI see imagery, and how do you optimize for humans and AI when it comes to different forms of media?
So you've got to remember that AI is reading your page. So a lot of the time they're taking your visuals as alt descriptions. So having your basics of SEO in there, making sure everything on your page is labeled correctly is really vital. The videos we haven't really seen play too much into AI. They are really useful for users though. There's historically, when I first joined conversion optimization, 10 years plus now, videos were quite controversial. They take up load time on the page. Users aren't going to interact with them. Over that 10 years, that's definitely changed, and social media and how we consume information has definitely changed. We see that videos play quite an integral part with users, especially if you are trying to convey a difficult topic or, a difficult answer, or to convey something very quickly. Videos can be very powerful.
When's the time and place to use YouTube and embed YouTube on your site, and when to use some more native video platform that I guess makes it more difficult for people to leave your site and view the video on another platform?
I think the key thing in that sentence there is, when do you want a user to leave your site? So if you are trying to get someone on your page to do something, you have an action for them in mind, you probably don't want to be sending them off to watch a video somewhere else, or potentially tempting them if you're embedding. But I think it probably depends most on the form of content. So thinking about what a user needs from that content. So if it's short form, maybe, it's best placed with you. If it's a longer video, YouTube. And thinking about, what content works really well on YouTube is, influencers, it is, reviews. So thinking about the type of content. So you might use that kind of embedding of YouTube at that point, which gives you sort of that trust and social proof aspect. But if it's a video that's explaining your product or explaining or answering a question, that's in your best place with you, and you have the trust level to be able to provide that video.
And in terms of measuring success, if you're tweaking a page, what metrics do you look at in order to actually try and determine that you've had some kind of improved success with AI search and humans?
I'm going to take the humans to start with. So there are lots of metrics that we can look at. I think it depends on the type of content that you're creating. But in general, when we're looking at content, the thing we're trying to do is get users to engage. So it's looking at those engagement metrics. So first thing I would look at is probably looking at our bounce rate or engagement rate to be able to understand, are people interested in the page? Look for pogo sticking behavior. Are people leaving that page, going to another page, coming back? It might suggest that the information isn't as concise as it needs to be, and it needs more supporting information. Having a look at scroll depth to be able to understand how much of your page a user consumes, be able to find their answers, it suggests they're more engaged. And then having a look at those interactions. So if you're putting micro CTAs, for example, in the page or navigation links, are people moving on and continuing their journey through your site? And then if it is sort of a page that is designed to lead to a conversion or lead to a lead, how is you affecting that? We want to not just be looking at SEO from a point of view of, well, we drive traffic. I think we need to be looking at, it's not just driving traffic and ranking, it's that experiential factor, which, Google and the other platforms are taking into consideration more and more now. It's not, our rankings are affected by the experience the user has on the page. AI is a little bit more tricky at the moment. It's quite manual in terms of how we're looking at those effects. We're creating sort of a list of key questions and seeing how highly we rank within AI in terms of what articles they're bringing back to be able to understand our presence.
And what's your go-to analytics software, and why?
I think that's so tricky, and it really, really varies. At the moment, I'm working with quite a lot of people that have Content Square. It's one of the partners we work with as well, which is a really interesting tool that goes sometimes slightly beyond where GA goes and starts to bridge that gap into user understanding and sort of behavioral insights. There's how people interact with every single element on your page, what page they go to next, where they exit, and it helps bring sort of a more rounded view of not just what's happened. You might be able to go, we had a high bounce rate. but GA might not be able to tell you why. So being able to add in that extra information really informs how we can change content, change a page, change a web experience to improve that metric.
Kirsty, what's your key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Human-first experiences are going to be what wins for SEO strategy next year. We can't just create content for AI. The pages need to be designed for real humans. And ironically, I think that gets very lost in the AI messaging at the moment. But I think everyone needs to remember that AI is designed to be as helpful as possible for the user, and we need to do the same.
Kirsty McLellan is an optimization and UX partner at Dentsu. Find her over on LinkedIn. Kirsty, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thanks so much for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.